Happy 250 years, America. God bless America. I am just so excited to be alive during this time. I hope I'm alive for the 275th, and God willing, be alive for the 300th. All right. So I'm thankful. I'm so thankful I get to be here with you to experience the 250th cycle. And what's really cool is it just doesn't end on July 4th, 2026. No, the war continues. Like, we've got many years and years of different events that's ahead of us until the war ends. Treaty of Paris is signed, and you know, it's cool. So if you're not familiar with what I'm doing and why I'm dressed the way this is, my grandfather was a member of the Dover Light Infantry. So I pieced together a kit that is approximate to what the Dover Light Infantry carried. We don't know what they had. This is one of the most frustrating parts about 18th century living history that I've learned. The primary sources are not very abundant. We've got survival bias that also goes into material culture. And so much of the stuff that the soldiers carried, they weren't like thrown in a box like World War II soldiers or even American Civil War soldiers as mementos. People didn't hold on to them, or they used them. And you got to keep in mind the average person in the 18th century, they were eking out an existence, right? Most of them weren't even really middle class. We were a developing middle class in the 18th century. But there was still a significant disparity. Even those who were farmers, they're pretty much dirt rich, but cash poor, right? My grandfather, who was in the Dover Light Infantry, he was a farmer in Delaware. That's pretty much all I know about him. He lived in Kent County, and he served with Washington at the crossing of the Delaware, and he served in patrolling the community. There's an uprising that the Dover Light Infantry helped quell. But much of the primary sources in regards to Delaware military history, letters, things like that, they all burned up in various fires. We don't have a lot of information, and that's across the board on all the different colonies. In regards to courthouse fires, that was fairly common. Where I live locally, we don't know where when a lot of our houses were built, because just as like 1900, we know that they were built before 1900, but like 1899, there was a courthouse fire. So everything that was built before then, it's 1900, doesn't matter. You know that it was older, but it's 1900. So I'm kind of going off a tangent here, but we don't know a whole lot. So everything that I'm showing you is pretty much conjecture. I based my kit off of a well-known, well-researched, well-vetted book that came out in the 1970s. And, but we don't know. Just bottom line, a lot of it is just conjecture. We do know that the Dover Light Infantry had a green uniform, faced in red, and they were equipped pretty well, but to an extent, we really don't know. So we're going based off of other things. Now, in that picture, it shows a cross belt like so, that would have the bayonet, and it would have the tomahawk or the belt axe, okay? Now, most soldiers in the Continental side didn't have bayonets. Having your knife, having your tomahawk or your belt axe, that's really what you're going to use when you have to charge. It's very different than what you really see on the movies. So the hand-to-hand would have been extremely brutal, right? You're using your rifle as club, you're using it as your tomahawk, to fend off hand-to-hand. It's pretty wild. We do know that the members in Delaware were probably amongst the most well-equipped soldiers early in the war versus other colonies. We know the Dover Light Infantry was well trained, and most of the Dover Light Infantry was of your middle class, middle to upper class. In fact, Thomas Rodney was the one who organized the Dover Light Infantry, and he is the brother of Caesar Rodney. Caesar Rodney was the signer of the Declaration of Independence, who barely made it. He was very ill, and they got him there to vote and sign on the Declaration of Independence. So Thomas Rodney, he's the one who put it together and led it. They were pieced together in April of 1776. They had time to drill, plus militia duty. You were drilling anyways. Not all state militias did that, by the way, but we do have record that the Dover militia was well trained, and that probably contributed to their success later on. Okay, so when it comes to the bayonet, I have a Brown Bess. The English English musket, the Brown Bess of the Shortland pattern. The Shortland pattern would have been probably the best at the time. It was the newest version, and the bayonet would have been pretty valuable to soldiers who are fighting more traditional way. Now, light infantry soldiers, they're the ones who did the attack beforehand to scout out, to skirmish, to probe, or to flank. They were a flanking type regiment, and they used their cover to fight instead of, breast to breast, line to line. Now, when it comes to the belt axe, I've already shown this. I've already shown you guys my Tomahawk, but I also told you guys I needed to make a cover because that dangling at your side, right, and moving around your gear, that Tomahawk could like cut your stuff. So, what do we know about period correct methods of carrying your belt axe or your Tomahawk or your hatchet? Well, we know that they did have belt cases. We also know that they had sling cases. Masks, I wasn't able to find anything about a mask. So this could be complete conjecture. My opinion though, this makes practical sense. Now this particular design is my own design. I didn't base it off of anything that's primary source or secondary source. Most of the pictures that you see of soldiers carrying it, they didn't have anything on it. They didn't have any type of mask, they didn't have any type of cover. They're just carrying it, Native American style, in their belts, and that is what it is. Okay? When you're at a reenactment, you also have to be very careful that, because people are playing, right? Like you don't want to get actually hurt. So this is what I decided on. And because I knew that this is going to be a weapon on a hand-to-hand, I wanted it to be quick. I didn't want to just fiddle there and untie. So I took this toggle, I made this toggle from deer antler because, we're American, right? We're a little bit more rustic. And the toggle is supposed to be a simple, quick release, twist and lock in type toggle. There you go. I want to move the camera and show you so you can see a little bit closer in more detail. So if you're not familiar with my video on the Tomahawk, oftentimes soldiers, they would personalize it either with pictures, with engravings, with tacks, things like that. Me, I opted for this, to tyrants the edge, yield to none but God. This was going to give me my confidence as I approached the English, the world's greatest superpower at the time, in battle. So this is made completely out of cow leather. There's no deer skin or anything like that. So I cut this, I dyed it, and I oiled it to make it a little bit more flexible, not as stiff. I did a loop. Same thing here, you can kind of see the deer toggle. So this just wraps around the back. It's kind of hard to do. Just make sure I'm not covering up everything. You can see, just kind of locks everything into place, just like that. So now, my mask isn't going to come off, but it's still easy to get off when I need it. And I like masks because I also like to just put them in my pocket. It's not going to be a big deal. It's not going to be something big. It's small size. I can hold it in my hand, stick it in my pocket, and we're good to go. There you go. Now I'll tell you that we have primary sources that pretty much mandated soldiers carry a tomahawk or belt axe. Now the belt axe or the tomahawk could be used more for than just battle. You could use it to chop firewood. You could use it to stake in your shelter or create your shelter. Shelters were pretty limited for the Continental Army. Washington and all the other colonies are kind of scraping by. We got people who are donating whatever they can to try to make life a little bit easier for an unprepared army. But overall, it was left up to the soldier to make do with whatever they had, which is also why it's so special to me that I have so many relatives who opted to join in the fight. All my relatives fought in militias, every single one. I have 6 relatives, my paternal and maternal grandfathers, who served in various colonies, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, and Delaware. And I just couldn't be more proud that they were that brave to do it. And to have all of them participate in the American Revolution, I think says something about the time as well. I don't know, maybe I'm overthinking it, but I think it's pretty cool. I'm pretty proud of them, and I thank you for taking the time and joining me today to discuss it. Discuss what my grandfather may have carried, why they carried it, how they used it, how they wore it, things like that. Now, if you like this video, please click like because it helps other people find it, and we really appreciate it. If you got some comments or questions, put it in the comments below. I love hearing what you guys have to say, especially this is a new impression for me. Some of you probably do 18th century, or you are familiar with 18th century reenacting, and you've got some wisdom that you could pass on to me, who's coming from early 20th century and the American Civil War, now going farther back. I love to hear what you guys have to say. And I know people read the comments as well, and they'll learn from you, and I appreciate that. Now, I wouldn't be doing any justice if I didn't tell you about the Press and Mess Kit. You can get your own Press and Mess Kit for $200. Seems like a lot, but let me tell you that, in my opinion, it is the best mess kit ever invented. It was invented by a guy named Guy H. Preston. Abercrombie and Fitch and other retailers sold this mess kit. They're very scarce to find original. They were made out of aluminum. Ours is going to be made out of 316L stainless steel. It comes with a cup, a 54-ounce stainless steel canteen with a screw top. You can use a cork if you want to be more historically accurate, but it comes with a screw top. And the skillet and the pan, the plate, come together and they lock together. That's the coolest features. There's no other mess kit I know that does that. And you can basically use it as a baker. You could use it as a container to carry your bread or your meats or something else like that. I like making biscuits, cookies, cobblers in it. It's the perfect one-man size for all that. Again, you can get it for $200. In the description box below, you can click the link to secure yours. We should be getting the prototype here soon. I was told that the prototype should be ready by the end of this week. Fingers crossed. I hope. Those of you who've been joining me on this journey, thank you so much for your patience and understanding. I know it's been a long time, and it means a lot to me. Thank you. Now, also, we're starting a museum. It's called the National Center of Outdoor Heritage, and I invite you to join us on this awesome adventure. We got some big names who's already on the board, who's helping out. If you'd like to check it out, go to www.honorableoutfitters.com. There's various ways that you can help. Financially is a big help, no matter how much, right? You can also help spread the word of mouth. If you have professional experience or you know somebody that has professional experience that could help us get on the advisory board or whatever, we'd really appreciate it. This is something that Sarge Vinian and I have been wanting to do for 3 years before he passed away. So this is very personal to me, and I know many of you who've been following my channel, who followed Nathaniel's and Sarge's and Dave's and James Bender's channels. You know, it's something that's close and dear to your heart. This is going to go from before colonization, so we're talking about Native Americans and their contributions to outdoor heritage, to modern outdoor heritage. It's going to be the Smithsonian of outdoor recreation. It's going to be awesome. And wouldn't it be cool for you to tell your kids, your grandkids, that you are a part of that? I think it'd be cool. Kind of like how I'm doing to my grandparents. Back then, they didn't know what their contributions was really going to do, but here I am, 250 years later, telling you about them. Some farmers in Rhode Island and in Delaware who decided to do something cool. They made a decision. Someday, someone could be talking about you. Be like, yeah, that guy, that woman helped start this museum. Wouldn't that be cool? I don't know. I think it'd be cool. So there you go. Now, if you'd like to see a video about the Press and Mess Kit, you can check it out here. If you'd like to see videos about my camp crafting stuff, then check it out here. Hope you guys have a wonderful week. Give a kiss to your loved ones. Happy 250th, and I'll see you guys next time. Take care.